Oh, welcome back to
Oh, oh,
Rewind to the Living Dead. I'm
oh.
Dan Martin.
Damon, you start howling, and Patrick's going to howl right along with you, brother.
Yes, Patrick, tonight we are kicking off one of the first horror films of 2025 with Lee Wanell's, well, actually, I said D. Let me just say, no D. There is no D.
There is
Lee
no Z.
Wanell's Wolfman.
Wolfman, released in January of 2025, starring Matilda Firth as Ginger, Chris Abbott as Blake, and Julia Garner as Charlotte. As you mentioned, Damon, written by Lee Wanell and Corbett Tuck, and directed by Lee Wanell. It's always a good time, Damon, to talk werewolf movies, and we're lucky we've gotten a few in just the span of a few weeks because we talked werewolves not that long ago, I think back in December or something like that. And now we're here with Wolfman, another Universal monster movie from the man himself, Lee Wanell. Damon, ow!
Every time I hear that, I just want to think. I think of Werewolves of London, the Warren Zevon song, where he's like
Oh yeah, yeah,
Werewolves of
very much so.
London. Sorry.
Ow!
Now, can we start with the honest conversation about January horror films? Because I know we've talked about this
Yes.
before in past years. Generally speaking, films that come out in January and February are where movies go to die. That is not a month or 2 months where studios are really, really trying to kill it at the box office. We've had this discussion before. Generally speaking, when a movie comes out in January or February, it's almost like the studio is conceding it's not going to make a lot of money. They don't expect great returns, and they're kind of just throwing it out there. Sadly, and I don't want to indoctrinate people, say like this is a bad movie because I'm saying this. I'm just like mentioning the fact that anybody who reviews this film or any film in January, being honest, and we actually have a really busy January, which is kind of odd because it doesn't generally happen that way. But last year we had Night Swim, and I think we had that exact conversation when we reviewed Night Swim, which was not a good movie. We talked about it, then we said, this is one of those instances where it feels like they knew this wasn't great, this probably wasn't going to do well, so like, let's release it in January because they know people aren't rushing to go to the theater in January. So I was a little surprised the Wolfman got this release treatment because The Invisible Man, which was the last film that I saw in the theater prior to the pandemic, which we did review on this show, and I adored that movie. That was such a surprising, such a great movie. I went into that film with no expectations and walked out with one of my favorite films of the year. It was incredible. So I was I was almost like, it's weird they're releasing this in January because Lee Wanell's a good guy. I mean, obviously he's the creator of the Saw franchise along with James Wan. He's had some successful films in the past. He did a great job with The Invisible Man. So I was like, why are they releasing this in January?
It is weird, and it's one of those things where I think it makes sense to mention that this is a Blumhouse picture, which Invisible Man was Blumhouse as well, right?
It was, yeah.
I think it
Universal and
was.
Blumhouse. Yeah, Universal and Blumhouse, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I can't remember if they were also united at the time as a Universal Blumhouse thing, where they sort of took over. They were like, "Hey, we'll do your Universal monsters for you," and they tried desperately to reboot The Mummy with Tom Cruise, and that didn't quite turn out well. They were trying all these different things, and then they handed over to Blumhouse, and Blumhouse gets this great movie that I don't think anyone saw coming, to be honest with you. I don't think anybody knew that Invisible Man was going to go as hard as it was, but Lee Wanell fans would. Lee Wanell fans would know that he makes interesting, visually and viscerally, these are interesting movies. And I will tell you right now, without spoiling anything about Wolfman, it's visually interesting, and it's very much something you haven't quite seen before. Whether that's good or bad, we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But it was one of those things where I was like, wow, they're really showing their teeth, pun intended, by putting this in January. They're saying like, we don't see another place on the calendar where this is going to pop. We think it's going to pop here. And actually, I believe I can't remember. I was peeking at the box office, and I believe it came in third behind Moana and oh god, there was like another movie That's
Den of
not.
Thieves 2, I think is that still
It
up
might have
there?
been Den of Thieves too, yeah. Which I never
Yeah.
saw Den of Thieves one. Like, who knew there was a second? But yeah, it was not. It was not a great week for Wolfman, and maybe we'll get into why. Maybe we'll get into the why of it all. But I do, like, I will tell you now. Like, I'm one of these guys that just like when I hear it's Lee Wanell, I'm gonna go look. You saw Upgrade, right? That was another one of his movies.
I did. I have seen Upgrade. I liked that movie. I thought it was a really interesting movie, really interesting take. And here's the thing about much like Invisible Man, where I want to give credit to Wolfman. And while I'll be honest, this was far from a perfect film, and I'll get into more of my criticisms as we get into the show. Um, Here's one thing I do want to credit Lee Wanell for, and this goes back to Invisible Man as well, is when you're doing these remakes, Dracula, Frankenstein, The Invisible Man, The Mummy, Creature from the Black Lagoon, all those classic Universal monsters, people are going in with a certain expectation because those are classic films. Those are beloved classic films. And when you remake them, you kind of have two choices. You can remake them, and I know that like Robert Eggers' Nosferatu isn't a Universal remake, but he went the direction of I'm going to just make a direct remake of Nosferatu. I'm going to add in a few elements, and the look's going to be better, the effects are going to be better, but I'm not changing the story. I'm not changing the concept. I am making the 1922 version of Nosferatu in 2024 when he released his movie. Then you go the other route where you try to take the concept and you totally reinvent it, which is what Lee Wanell did with The Invisible Man. I don't think I've actually seen the original Invisible Man, if I'm being honest with you, but I've seen other Invisible Man movies. I know there have been a bunch over the years. Um, and I thought his take on that story, with basically being a story of abuse and domestic abuse and stalking and transforming that into the story that he did, was brilliant. It was such a unique, different take on what I went in with zero expectations. Like, I don't know if this is going to be like worth sitting down to watch this. Ended up being totally blown away. Wolfman, in a lot of ways, follows that same formula, where this is not Wolfman being remade. The original Wolfman from 1941, starring Lon Chaney Jr., was a gothic horror film about an aristocrat who gets infected and becomes a werewolf, and it's very like Victorian era, time period piece, which I think I've been very honest on the show and said I'm not really a huge fan of in the past. I've seen the original Wolfman. It's fine. It's not a bad movie. Not really my cup of tea, but what I appreciate about this Wolfman is Lee Wanell said, okay, I'm going to make it, but I'm going to make my own Wolfman. I'm not going to do a remake. I'm not going to do what you're expecting. We already had that. Benicio del Toro and Anthony Hopkins starred in Joe Johnston's The Wolfman in 2010. Now, I'm just being honest, Patrick. I do not like that movie at all. I like Joe Johnston. He did a great job with Captain America: The First Avenger. That's another of his movies. I think he did great in that movie. But man, The Wolfman is bad. I love Anthony Hopkins. Love Benicio del Toro. Emily Blunt's in that movie. Boy, is it just a bad movie. But it is almost a straight up remake of the 1941 Wolfman. Yeah. So I appreciate the originality. I guess is what I'm getting at here. I appreciate the originality. Lee Wanell said, great, I'm going to do a Wolfman movie, but I'm going to do my Wolfman movie. And it's not going to be like any Wolfman movie you've ever seen before. And to his credit, he achieves that in this film.
He does achieve it. There's stuff, and Damon, you and I, we love werewolves. We actually put aside a month for werewolves a couple of years back. I think it was a July. So go searching for maybe July 2021, I believe it was, or 22.
That's right. Yeah, I think that's right.
And we did all werewolf month, and because we love werewolf movies. But the truth is, most werewolf movies aren't great. Like, they're just not. They're kind of slim pickings, which is weird because it's like they cost more money because you need transformations and shit. I have a werewolf script that I will probably never get to because it's just too expensive to make. But when you're dealing with Blumhouse numbers, and this was probably not a very expensive movie. I'm guessing it was somewhere between 8 and 14 million bucks. It was somewhere probably in that range, which is a pretty low budget movie. You see things in here you'll never see in any other werewolf movie probably ever again. Like, these are ideas and stylistic choices that only a guy like Lee Wanell would know how to make, and they work for what they are. Like, they are effective in what they are. And of course, we're being cryptic because we don't want to get into spoilers yet. We want to encourage people to go check it out and see what they think about it. But this is a very, you and I both love contained horror. This is a contained horror. This takes place in a cabin in the woods. Classic horror in terms of backdrop. And then we're dealing with a werewolf in a way that is totally non-traditional. So you get a little bit of both all in one movie. You talked about Invisible Man. What was so strong about Invisible Man was the theme. The theme of toxic relationships, domestic abuse. These things were on full display and they were being explored deeply. I think, in my opinion, before giving anything away about the movie, I think the themes of this movie, they were fighting against what was required of the movie, which is what you need to get to the fucking werewolves at some point. And they do. I'm not saying they don't. I'm just saying, like, you're a werewolf movie. Eventually we need to get to werewolf stuff. So you have to find a balance of how to put theme into it, because Leigh Whannell's a fantastic director, a fantastic creative. And he loves to weave his themes into his films in a very great way. But he also had the task of presenting us with a werewolf movie. And I wonder if that wasn't a little bit challenging. It's just sort of being like, hey, what if Leigh Whannell did the next Iron Man movie? There are certain things in the Iron Man lore he's going to have to shoehorn in, no matter what. No matter what, they kind of have to be in there. And so he wants to get to certain themes, and bad example, by the way, Marvel would probably give him plenty of money and time and give him a 2.5 hour movie to reboot Iron Man if he wanted to, and it would probably be great. In fact, Marvel, if you're listening, which I'm sure they listen because they're huge fans of us, go ahead and give Leigh Whannell a Marvel movie, because he probably deserves it. The man's a fantastic visionary director, and he could add a little bit of style and fun to any sort of franchise. And I'm happy he took on the Wolfman, because there are things that, regardless of how I feel about this movie, that I will carry with me into the next werewolf movie and go, well, hey, Leigh Whannell did that, so can you guys show me something new? Because I haven't seen something like that before.
Yeah, and so again, without getting too deep into spoilers, we're gonna have to get to spoilers relatively soon, because a lot of what we want to talk about is going to require spoilers. But here's where I ran into problems with Wolfman. First off, as I said, it's a very unique vision, and I appreciate that. The take that he has on the werewolf legend is something I've never seen before, which is really saying something, because I've seen a lot of werewolf movies. You just mentioned it. We both love werewolf movies. But the one thing we've mentioned when we talk about werewolf movies is there's it's almost like a steep cliff. Like, you're either dog soldiers or you fall off the cliff. And I don't want to name names, but you fall off the cliff and you're just a really bad werewolf movie. It's hard. There's a hard balancing act between, like, a really good, like a Silver Bullet or a Dog Soldiers or an American Werewolf in London, and then there's some really bad werewolf movies out there, like Underworld, which is just yeah.
I watched every Underworld movie.
Yeah, I watched them too, but they're not great movies. But my point is like it's hard. It's hard to make a good werewolf movie, which we've talked about. You said you've written a werewolf movie. I've always dreamed of making my own werewolf, because of all the monster lore out there, the Dracula, the vampire, all the different, like, genres that have been remade 1,000 times. Werewolves are my favorite. I love the werewolf mythology. So I'm always like, man, I would love, but it's a daunting task because it's so hard to make a good one. I just recently rewatched Cursed, which is a Wes Craven film. And I watched it and I was like, boy, oh boy, this was not good back then, and it's still not really very good today. And I love Wes Craven, but man, that's a rough film. So much CGI and the wolves, and it's not great. But that's my point. Like, Wes Craven is one of my all-time favorite filmmakers. Even he struggled to make a compelling werewolf movie. So it's tough. I guess that's my point. It's tough to make one of these. But again, where I want to give credit to Leigh Whannell is he made a totally unique vision for this particular Wolfman, which I adore that part of it. That's probably my favorite part of this werewolf movie, because I've never seen this werewolf. I've never seen this version of a Wolfman story.
You know what's funny, Damon? Sorry, I'm going to let you finish, but I just want to give a teaser for our spoiler section. I have seen this werewolf before, and it's shocking. But go ahead. Please, go on.
I look forward to hearing that. You talk about themes. Thematically is where this film suffers, because it's almost like the script, the story didn't know which direction it wanted to go to. And that's where the problem lies in this movie, because in the trailer, and again, I'm not spoiling anything that's not in the trailer. In the trailer, you get the sense of this husband and wife and their daughter go to this remote cabin in the middle of the woods, which we already mentioned in the intro. It's Blake, who is the father, Julia Garner, who plays the mother, Charlotte, and the daughter is Ginger. Blake and Charlotte live in the city, and Charlotte is a super successful journalist. Blake is a writer, but he's out of work, so he's basically been a stay-at-home dad. He's super close with his daughter, and they get news that his dad has been declared dead. He's been missing for, we assume, years, but he's finally been declared dead. And he's getting ownership of his dad's property, which is out in the middle of nowhere in Oregon. And he has to go there to basically clean out the house and his dad's belongings. And he says, this will be a great chance for us as a family to just get out of the city, spend some quality time together, because his wife is working so much, she almost feels disconnected from their daughter, whereas their daughter is totally attached to her dad. She is a dad's girl. He is a girl dad. And she's like, this is an opportunity for all of us to get away for a weekend. We'll go up, we'll work and clean out my dad's house. We'll all have some quality family time, just kind of isolated away from the world. It'll be great. And Charlotte kind of begrudgingly says, okay, let's go. And so they go to Oregon, and that's where kind of the mayhem starts, where they run into something wrong. Now, the way the trailer sold this was, and again, not a spoiler, Blake, the father, gets infected somehow. He gets torn up and he gets infected, and he starts to become a werewolf. That's the premise that we are told in the trailer. I'm not saying that doesn't happen. I'm not saying they lied to us, and that's not what happens in this movie. But thematically, we're told that the dad is the Wolfman. He gets infected by a wolf, and he becomes the Wolfman. He gets bitten. That's a fairly classic version of a Wolfman story.
Yeah. That's
the story we're told. The problem is, thematically, the ideas are there, but the execution of actually getting there and how it actually unfolds throughout the movie is not only kind of meandering, it takes a really long time to get there, but by the time it gets there, you almost feel unsatisfied. You're like, really, this is the direction we're going? It's almost like he did. It's almost, here's the way I want to say it. People are going to say this is a spoiler. I promise you it's not. It's almost like he didn't want to make the Wolfman the bad guy. Like, he didn't want to make the Wolfman the Wolfman. Like, how are you going to not make the Wolfman the Wolfman? That's kind of the confusing part of this. He didn't want to make, it's almost like he didn't want to commit to the monster, if that makes sense.
It makes sense. And I think, like, ultimately it breaks down to this. A great werewolf movie is about one of two things. It's about theme, which typically is like, you know, unleashing or trying to contain the beast within, which is usually kind of a story of, like, you know, toxic masculinity or trauma or something. Like, you're trying to hold in a rage, a deep rage that you've been suffering, this curse that you're carrying with you, quite literally. You know, thematically, there's that. Or it's let's see, what did I say? It was theme or magic. Okay, yeah, that was the other thing I was getting at. There's theme or there's magic in a werewolf movie. A great example of theme would be, Damon, you and I, probably top 3 werewolf movie for us, Wolf of Snow Hollow by the great Jim Cummings. Theme all fucking day. It's all about containing the beast within. If you have not seen the Wolf of Snow Hollow yet, go watch it, and then you'll probably end up buying it. And then feel free to play it as you listen to our Wolf of Snow Hollow podcast that we did way back in, I think, 2020. A tremendous werewolf film because of its themes. Then there's the magic side of things. You got like movies like Silver Bullet. I think what happened here is that Leigh Whannell, unfortunately, couldn't balance his theme. That's my opinion. And how do I put this gently before spoilers? I mean, spoilers has to be next at this point, Damon. I'm so choked. He shows the magic trick the entire time. And if he shows me the magic trick the entire way, what I don't have is any sense of mystery or dread or unknown, so fear is gone. If I know what the magic trick is going in, because he lays it out for you in the first act, I'm screwed. I'm screwed by the time we get to the goods. When we get to that nasty shit, I'm like, oh, damn it. I already know what the magic trick is. I know everything that's going to transpire, and I know why it's transpiring. If you do some close up magic with me and I can't see that the card got tucked into your sleeve or that you just pretended to throw it but it's still between your two fingers or something like that. If I saw that from the wrong angle, I'd go, "Oh, okay, there's no magic trick here. I saw what was happening." It's kind of what he built into the story. He showed us before he showed us, and then like slowly took us through the magic trick. And it leaves you feeling a little empty in the end. I think that's what Sid was probably getting at when she was talking about it. If you're not following Horror Chronicles anywhere on the great social medias, please do. She's a friend of the show and a fantastic collaborator. She felt empty. She felt like something's off about this. I think that's my theory, is that there's too much magic revealed very early for you to ever really get like fucking wowed by what is an incredibly talented director. I mean, when Leigh Whannell turns it on, when he turns on the Leigh Whannell in this movie, it's on and it's there, and you're like, damn, that's cool. I've never seen that before. But the theme is imbalanced and the magic is gone.
Yeah, and I agree. Like, showing us the magic trick was part of the problem, and then story wise, my part of the problem is that it just felt like he couldn't commit to the story.
Yeah, and I've got a theory on that too.
The story and the themes aren't bad. They're not. Right. It's actually an interesting theme. But then he just fails to commit to it. It's almost like, I don't want to go there. It's almost like, like you're making, I know this is a very extreme example, but we're a horror show. It's like making a movie about a serial killer, but you don't want the serial killer to kill anyone. That kind of defeats the purpose of a serial killer movie, right? Like, if they're conflicted about being a serial killer, this movie thematically, he has a really solid idea. But then he just doesn't want to commit to it fully. And it's almost frustrating because you're just like, just go there, man. Like, you're standing on the ledge, jump. Yeah. That's the only way you're going to get there in a movie like this, is you got to jump. And it's almost like, no, I don't want to jump. I just want to stand there and tease that I'm going to jump. And because there's a lot to like about this movie. I want to be clear about that. But that's also the most frustrating part about this movie, because story-wise, I'm just like, go get there. Get where I know what you're trying to say. I know where you want to go. Get there. And it takes forever to try to get there. And even when it finally gets there, it's almost like unsatisfying in a way, in my opinion. I know people are like, dude, you're talking in so many circles right now without spoilers. So I feel like we got to get into spoilers. So again, Wolfman is in theaters right now. And to be clear, we've criticized this movie for the last 10 minutes or so. I want to be clear. There's definitely still a lot to like about this movie. And I've seen some pretty harsh reviews out there. I don't think that's warranted necessarily, in my opinion. I still enjoyed a lot of this film. It is totally original, and I did appreciate the originality that Leigh Whannell and his wife took in the screenplay to make this movie. So I'm going to tell you to go see it anyways, just because I want you to form your own opinions. And
I want people to know, too. I want people to know too, as you tell them it's available in theaters, that I want to reiterate, there are things in this movie you have never seen a werewolf movie do. So that's why I feel you need to check it out, because maybe you'll feel differently than me.
Yeah, so go check it out right now. Wolfman in theaters right now. We are now getting into full spoilers. So again, if you haven't seen Wolfman, be forewarned. We are now going to get into full spoilers. And if you just don't care, then again, here we go. So Patrick, let me just lay out the plot of the movie, and then we'll talk about thematically why we had problems here. So as I mentioned, Blake takes his wife Charlotte and Ginger from their home, their posh home in San Francisco, to the woods in Oregon, where he grew up with his father. We learned at the very opening of the movie that Blake's father is a survivalist. He lives off the grid. And him and his son basically live on the fruits of their own labor. They grow, they kill, they live basically in a cabin in the middle of the woods together. No one else around except for a few other survivalist neighbors. And you realize very early on there's something weird. Now they give you a very brief, one of those great screen synopsis to open the movie, where they kind of explain what it is. They say that there's this myth about this wolf creature in the woods of Oregon that a hiker went missing in the 80s or whatever, and there's a rumor that he got bitten by some sort of creature and he became like this wolf-like creature. It's almost like an infection or a virus that you become this wolf-like creature.
Yeah,
so
like
we get told that right. Yeah, we get told that right up front, and then early on in the movie we meet Blake and his father's taking him hunting. They get separated, and his dad basically flips out on him and says, "Never leave my side." And when they get home, he calls one of their neighbors on the CB, and he's like, "I saw it in the woods. It's out there. We need to protect our children. We need to find this thing and stop it." So we are made to understand that there is some sort of creature in this wood. We do get a very brief, like, shadowy glimpse of this creature in the woods. But then we cut away from that and we catch up with Blake years later, where he's living with his wife and he's been estranged from his father for years, and he gets word that his dad's finally been declared dead after being missing for what we have to assume is years at this point. They never put an exact timeline on it, but they basically say his dad went missing and he's been gone long enough now to where they're declaring him dead, and now his son is taking possession of his home and everything. And so Blake, as I said earlier, decides to take his family up to this isolated house in the middle of the Oregon woods to clean out his dad's house and hopefully have some quality family time. But on the way up there, they run into one of those crazy neighbors who is in a tree stand hunting, and he's a very weird, squirrely guy and very uncomfortable. He, like, gets in the moving truck with them. He kind of gets lost going home because he hasn't been there in like 20 years. And the neighbor's like, "Well, I can show you how to get there." And he's like, "Okay, great." And so they're driving along, and then they see something creature-ish thing standing in the middle of the road. Blake swerves to avoid it, and that's where you see the great scene in the trailer where basically the moving truck is upside down. He's trying to get his family out, and then as he tries to close a door, something reaches up and scratches him, and that's where he gets infected with this lycanthropic disease, this wolf disease. They make it back to the house. They run from the creature. They make it back to the house, and that's where Blake starts his transformation, slowly but surely becoming this wolf creature. And when I say wolf creature, I'm not saying wolf man, because it's, again, the unique aspect, and I want you to tell me where you've seen this before, but the unique aspect to me was that it's an infection. This isn't the moon and silver bullets, and like it's a disease. It's almost, in a weird way, it's almost like what they did with Blade. I know that sounds like a weird correlation, where they're basically when you meet Blade and they're talking about the vampire, they treated, the one doctor in the movie treats it like an infection. She's just like, it's not this great, gift or whatever. It's an infection. It's a blood-borne infection is the way she boils it down to it. So this is just an infection. You're a disease, nothing more. That's kind of how they treat this. This isn't, the moon turns and once every 30 days you turn into the wolf man. None of that. It is a disease that transforms you into this wolf-like creature. Once you transform into this wolf-like creature, you are that wolf-like creature from then until death. There's no transformation. There's no howling at the moon and there's no none of that. So I appreciate the uniqueness of that, but that's where we kind of pick up the story, is that Blake begins transforming and his family realizes something is horribly wrong with him.
All this is a wonderful, like, foundation, that you just laid out for us here, Damon, but there's major problems with this foundation. First of all, that prologue card that explains that exactly what happens. Some hiker gets scratched by something and he gets a sort of mountain fever. And then they even say at the very end of that prologue card, but the natives of that land call it Face of the Wolf. And you go, well, gee, I wonder what's going to happen. I mean, it's literally the first shot of the movie. Then they have this extended cold open with him and his dad, they're coming face to face basically while they're hunting with one of these Face of the Wolf type people. And, it's kind of a nice buildup of tension, and they put in some visual themes that are going to eventually come back around. Very, like, kind of classic, some might even dare say tropey setups that will eventually come back around at the end of the movie. And you go, okay, I see what's going on here, but I kind of know where this is going, which is weird. It's like very much telegraphing like what's going to happen. Then you go and you meet them you meet Blake in his adult life after the cold open, and life isn't great with him and Charlotte. They're kind of they got a young child, and they're sort of like they're pulled apart. That's what kids do to people. That's the real horror story, by the way. And so sorry. And so people, they do this setup, and you already kind of know where things are going. And when he says this killed me, when he says, "Hey, the state finally declared my dad dead," like, Yes, okay. You've just smacked me over the face with my dad is a werewolf out in the woods. Like you just smacked me over the face with it. And by the way, not without them trying desperately not to. But, you know, it was just so painfully obvious when he says the state has declared my dad dead, and then I think she questions something, and he goes, yeah, well, they've never found the body, and I go, oh fuck, guys, you're really telegraphing that when we go out into these woods, we're going to bump into your dad who's a werewolf. Like you're just telling me that it's going to happen again. Like, and I'm I don't know if Lee Wanell and oh god, her name and Corbett had studio pressure to make that really clear. That could have happened. I don't know, or they could have chosen that. I'm not sure, and I'm not accusing anybody right now. I'm just saying that what the finished product gave us was no mystery at all. If you've watched two horror movies in your life, you're like, I know where this is going. That scene happens, and then the conveniences start stacking up. They just happen to roll over with the truck, oh, just yards from his house where he was completely lost and didn't know how to get to. Now they can run to it very quickly, and very quickly it's got power and everything, and they can kind of lock themselves in there. And you just know that the beast that is roaming around the outside of this house is his dad. You just know that's coming, and here it goes, folks. It is his dad. It just is, and you're just like, shit. Here's what I can appreciate. Okay, and now and just from the trailer alone, you know what's going to happen. You know that Blake is going to turn into a werewolf. You know that's happening, or a wolf man, or face of the wolf, whatever he's going to have. You know a werewolf fight's coming down. You know that's coming. Like you just know it. If for werewolf enthusiasts, you know that's happening. What I appreciated about this movie was the werewolf fight happened at about the end of the second act, instead of the finale, which is werewolf versus werewolf, which almost every fucking werewolf movie does this shit now, where they just go, yeah, have two werewolves battle out. Werewolves did that just back in December. Frank Grillo turns into a werewolf at the end and fights another werewolf. They do it at the end of the second act for a very good reason, Damon, because they want to set up that now indeed it'll be Charlotte and Ginger who are now in the crosshairs of their own father/husband. That's what's supposed to be thematically very dramatic and very harrowing. You're like, oh no, sweet little Ginger and Charlotte are now the target of their own family man. Like that sucks. We don't want that for these people. The problem was way back there in the setup. What they set up was that Blake and Charlotte were kind of on the outs, and she was very detached from them, and maybe she was even kind of ready to kick Blake to the curb. And maybe even Ginger, truth be told. She was just sort of like, I think maybe it'd be better if I just went off on my own since you're so good with her. And this is how they shaped the character. And it's interesting that a husband and wife, like if it was just a guy that wrote this, you'd be like, wow, pal, like that's, yeah, okay. But a woman wrote this too and just went like, yeah, maybe I kind of want to just abandon you two. So all that lead up, Charlotte is sort of vilified a little bit, like slightly. Even when the local gets in the truck and he's a little creepy, but he's nowhere like 1980s camp counselor kind of creepy. He's just like, she doesn't know him, but she's acting like he's like the plague. And so it again just kind of reinforces the feelings toward Charlotte, that Charlotte kind of sucks. And even Ginger is like constantly like contradicting Charlotte and just being like, daddy's right, and Charlotte's got like a sourpuss on all the time, and you're just like, like I guess we don't really like her. But now, all the way over here in the third act, you have to love her. She has to protect her daughter. Now I understand the rationale on the writing side. It's like, oh, in my ordinary world I wasn't a great parent and now I have to be. But the problem was so much of the movie, especially the first 2/3 of it, are balanced in Blake's favor. And all through that sickness, as he's getting the mountain fever, as he's getting Face of the Wolf, you're with him most of that time. And most of that time you are feeling for him. Christopher Abbott's doing a great job of showing the pain of what it's like to make this terrible transition into whatever he's becoming. So you spend a lot of time with him. And then in the third act, I'm just supposed to jump on board with Charlotte. and I'm supposed to like be, excited and in her corner and it's no fault of Julia Garner's. It's just like you're not invested in her. You haven't given her any time. She's been in the background of this movie. They a couple of times will change over to her perspective to see what it's like to watch him suffer a little bit. But then they kind of snap back over to the other side because let's be honest, the most interesting stuff happening here, Damon, and I would love for you to talk about this a little bit. The most interesting stuff is happening to Blake. We are seeing, and this is the very unique thing about this movie, we are seeing what it's like to turn into a werewolf from the perspective, quite literally from the eyes of the person becoming the wolf.
And that is ultimately what I loved most about this movie was the slow, gradual, painful transition to becoming a wolf. It's not American Werewolf in London, which is a classic, of course, but it's not where he sees the full moon and boom, he transforms and we get this vicious transformation from man to beast, which is great. That's an iconic scene. Rick Baker won an Oscar for that transformation. It's incredible. But this is a slow, painful transformation, and seeing it through Blake's eyes is painful because you realize, like, they paint him as like the ultimate dad. Like his job is dad. He is the dad. He loves his daughter and he is so committed to her. Like that's what he wants to be doing. That's all he wants to be doing is being the dad. And watching him painfully transform into this creature and knowing that there's no way to stop it, that it's just happening to him, and watching his personality fall away and watching him go from man to beast is a really interesting theme in this movie, and it's creepy, it's disturbing, and it's hard to watch because the way they paint Blake early on, as you said, he's the guy we're supposed to root for. Julia Garner, Charlotte, is the one we're supposed to be kind of like, yeah, she's kind of objectionable. Like, we don't particularly like her. She's not a particularly great mom. She doesn't really seem to want to be there. She doesn't really seem to even like her husband. So it's almost like, yeah, we could do without her. Let's stick with dad and the daughter. That's the combo. That's the power in this family. But the transformation, watching him slowly devolve into this creature is horrifying in a lot of ways. Thematically, though, and this is what I talked about before and that I can get into, and you already kind of mentioned it, so I won't belabor the point. I won't repeat what you said. But they paint Blake as such a hero, as such a guy who is there and he loves his daughter. And he's trying desperately to love his wife. She just kind of won't let him. She's kind of like shutting him out. She's more concerned with her work than her family. And as you said, at the beginning of the movie, you get this sense that she's like 2 minutes away from just being like, peace, I'm out, have fun with the kid, fuck off. Like, that's really the vibe she's giving off at the beginning of this movie. And Blake's like desperately trying to save his marriage and save his family. So you like Blake. And that's where I talked about the theme of this movie falls apart because it's almost like they knew. They sold it to you. The literal trailer says, what if someone you love became something else? That's literally the words on the screen in the trailer. But they paint it so well to make Blake such a good guy and such a great dad. And he is. Like that. Christopher Abbott's performance is incredible. And the way they portray him as like the ultimate dad is great. But then his transformation, it's like they don't want to take that step to make him the villain. They don't want to take that step to make him the bad guy. They don't want to take that step to make him the beast. And it takes so long, even as he's transforming and he fights Dad Wolf, his dad, who, again, as you said, they literally just lay it out on Front Street. Like, my dad's been missing for years in the wolf forest. What do you think happened to him?
With this long preamble of how my dad knows there's a wolf out there. Like, it's
like they could have just tried to flashing lights like wolf dad, wolf dad, wolf dad. So we know that. But then the wolf dad is attacking the family, and it's Wolf Blake who has to save his family from his dad. He kills his dad, bites his neck off, and he dies. You're like, he saved him. And then his full transformation goes through, and then he's after his family. My problem with that is you're telling me that he's protected. He's literally protected right up into the moment when he goes full wolf. And it's just like, really? Because the entire premise of the movie is he's this guy who gets infected and he becomes a wolf man. They didn't need to overcomplicate that. It's sad and tragic that a great guy becomes a wolf man.
Yeah. It's
But
tragedy.
again, as I said, the entire movie, it's almost like we don't want to go there. You just see it in the writing room. Like Lee and his wife are like, I don't want to make Blake be a bad guy. And he doesn't fully transform into the bad guy until the last like 15 minutes. And it's such a brief, like, a couple of scenes. And again, I'm not saying they needed to make him the ultimate villain the entire time, but they spend so much time in the transformation. And then even when he transforms, he's still a good guy because he saves his family from Wolf Dad. Even then, they don't want to take it away from him. They finally have to. It's almost like, well, we have to have him chase his family now. But it's like, that was so frustrating because the entire premise is watching this guy become a thing, become a beast, become something he didn't want to become. I understand that's difficult. You don't want to do that. But they tried so hard not to make him the bad guy. And I'm like, he's turning into a fucking wolf man. Like, he's going to go after his family. Just get there already.
Well, and I think I see it as very intentional that they wanted to make that part of it tragic. The tragedy is like, and really, like I said, like I'm saying, like, and you're right, it's really the last 15 minutes of what is, I think roughly, yeah, it's an hour and 100-minute movie. So for the last 15 minutes is the only time you get where they have to truly fear him. And that's the tragedy. They want to say that in the end, this is a tragedy, right? You know, like I see it as very purposeful, but it lacks the impact, you know. And then here's the thing. Here's the other thing is like Lee Wanell like putting his style stamp on all of this, which was fun to watch. It was sort of the kind of the middle bulk of the movie where movies tend to sag. I would say this movie doesn't sag in the middle. If I'm going to give it like a big positive, is that in the middle when he's really turning, you see the world through the eyes of him, and you see what the disease is doing to him, which is it. First of all, it's doing all these like dog like things, like he has incredible hearing, incredible smell, and you're like, okay, well that feels very normal to me. But then there's like this wolf sight, and so like he can see in the dark better because you know I think it's dogs, or maybe it's cats, I don't know. Some kind of animal has great sight in the middle of the night, and so he can see things, you know, in a very different way, and we get put in that perspective, and that's interesting. But the tragedy and the thing that they're doing, they're making kind of this little sad story, is that like on his end, when you go there, you realize his family, who are desperately trying to save him, on his side, he's losing sight of them, quite literally. When he looks at them, they look like, not, I don't know, how did I describe it? Like demonic, or sort of just, they look like enemies, like something I should attack. Like that's kind of what it changes his perspective. Their eyes start to glow. For some reason, Damon, their mouths are weird. I don't know what's going on over the last 18 months, but mouths have to be weird in movies. So like what this disease is doing to him is tricking him into seeing them as something that he needs to attack. And that's tragic. And you go, okay, well, that's sad. I don't want that for this family that I'm rooting for. At least, you know, you don't want to see this little girl get mauled to death by her dad. You don't want to see it, but you also know that that's very unlikely to happen because you've seen so much of the magic trick already. You know, and they do this very thematic thing from the minute you saw him and Ginger together. They do this thing where like she can read his mind, you know, which is a little game he plays with her. And he goes, "What am I thinking right now?" And she goes, "My daddy loves me." And he goes, "Oh my God, you're a mind reader." Da da da. They carry that theme through the movie to sort of say like Ginger knows deep down her dad's in there. And so as they hammer that into you like 3 or 4 times, by the way, before he fully transitions, you know that once he's the wolf, or whatever he is, that he's not going to harm her because she can see deeper into his head. It's not truly seeing into his head, but they wanted to thematically make you understand that him and his daughter have such a deep connection that she'll be able to go, I know he's my dad deep down in there, and I know he cares about me, but we're going to have to put daddy down like old Yeller. We're going to just have to put him down. And they quite literally shoot him at the back of the deer blind. Spoiler alert for the ending of that movie. But, you know, they have to take him out. But you already know that's coming. You know no one's on that mountain to save them. I mean, if they really wanted to fuck with us, Dad would have never been the wolf, and Dad would have saved them. Like that I would have been like, oh shit, didn't see that coming. But his angry dad from when he was a kid actually wasn't a werewolf, but he was, stuck out in the woods or whatever because he had been pinned down by this beast, and they attracted the beast in their direction, so he was able to get to his guns and kill the damn thing. Like maybe that would have been a little more interesting, and it'd be like, "Hi, I'm your grandpa, actually, and let me show you around." Sorry to rewrite of the Living Dead. I don't mean to do that. I
Well,
just could have.
to
It
your
could have been
point,
better.
well, and to your point about rewriting Living Dead, again, I'm not trying to rewrite this. Let me. I know it's going to sound like a weird comparison, but the way they're painting the transformation of man to beast, it's almost like a movie about an alcoholic in a lot of ways. And I'll use this.
Hmm.
I'll use this comparison. People are like, "Wow, you're making a stretch here," but let me just use this comparison. There's a great show on HBO. It's been out for years now. It's called Euphoria. And in
Great show.
Euphoria, Zendaya, who is incredible, plays a character named Rue. And we meet Rue from day one and find out that she is a drug addict. And she struggles terribly with her addiction to drugs. She tries desperately to get cleaned up, but she struggles like a lot of addicts do. And as a guy who grew up in a house full of a drug addict and an alcoholic, I fully understand this part of the world. But the character of Rue is like constantly teetering on someone you love, but someone you also kind of hate because when she's on drugs, she becomes kind of the worst person in the world because her worst instincts kick in because she will do anything to maintain that high. Now, when I say that, people are like, hey, you just ruined Euphoria. I promise you I did. And that's every great story about addiction is that like an addict is not themselves when they're addicted. That's not the person you've loved. That's not the person you've come to love because they become a totally different person when they're addicted to something, alcohol, pills, heroin, whatever it is. And so that character, and again, I understand Euphoria is a long form show, it's 20 episodes or whatever, but there are moments when you love the character and there are moments when you hate the character, and that's part of what addiction does to a person. The mistake I think they made in Wolfman is because they built up Blake to such hero worship levels. And as you said, you're not really made to like Charlotte. They don't really give her a whole lot of redeeming qualities. So by the last 15 minutes, when they finally transform him into the beast, you still don't necessarily love Charlotte. Yes, she kicked in to like save her daughter, which you're like, okay, well, I mean, you should. Like, she's your fucking daughter. Of course you should. But again, they're not really making her mother of the year.
They're not, Damon, because so much of that middle part of the movie, I'd be like, my daughter needs to be like right on my hip because I know what's going on. And so many times it's like they're in other rooms. And I was like, they're
Yeah.
not even trying to make her like lock into being a great mom until she is forced to be a great mom. Because I understand that like people are complicated, but I was like, they're not even giving us enough evidence along the way to tell me that she's going to lock in and become a great mom.
And the fact that they spend so much of this movie with the wolf dad, the Blake's dad as the actual wolf man, that they can't even let Blake become the antagonist. He has to save his family as the wolf man, and then finally he just can't fight the beast anymore and he becomes this creature who's hunting his family because he's become this beast. It just takes so long to get there that it just feels unfulfilling to me because they built Blake up as such a hero, and I get it. And that's the tragedy of the situation is that he loves his family, he loves his daughter, he is the ultimate girl dad, but he can't help it. He's an addict. He's on heroin, he's on pills, he's on alcohol. In this case, he's on wolf. He is going full wolf. And I think that version of the story, that slow transformation of watching him getting re-addicted to heroin, or in this case, getting infected by the wolf virus, that's the tragedy. But they spend so much time avoiding it. Like they don't want him to become the bad guy.
You love him the
And
whole
it's
time.
like, yeah, and so in an hour and 40-minute movie, you spend an hour and 25 minutes rooting for Blake. And then you spend 15 minutes with him like finally going full wolf and going after his family. It's just unsatisfying because you built this guy up to be such a great guy, and then he just immediately becomes like, oh, he's finally transformed, and he's running after his family after he's desperately tried to stay himself. He's desperately tried to stay connected to his wife and daughter, and then he even protects them from his wolf dad, kills the other wolf, And that's when he finally transformed. It's just like, I understand you've written a very strong, compelling character in Blake. He's a great dad. But that's the tragedy of this situation, is that he's going to transform. He's going to put that needle back in his arm, and he's going to become someone that we don't recognize. And that's where I relate it back to Rue and Euphoria. Like, there are moments in that show where I'm just like, God, I hate her. Like, she is just an awful, awful person. There's other moments you love her. You love that character. She's a great character. But that's the point. And that's like if you watch any great movie about addiction, that is the conflicting part of that character. When you're addicted, when you're on whatever you're on, you may be like the life of the party for 5 minutes, but then you become a totally different person. And it's almost like he didn't want to admit that Blake was addicted to the heroin. It's almost like he didn't want to admit that he was infected by this wolf virus. And even when he did infect him with the wolf virus, he's like, hold on. I got to save my family first, kill Wolf Dad, and then I'll finally transform. It was just a very deflating story because it took so long. I know where they were trying to go. But again, as I've said, and I don't want to just keep repeating myself, it just feels like they didn't want to go there. Like, we can't make Blake the bad guy.
Damon, speaking of Face of the Wolf, we need to get to the nitty and the gritty before we get into categories here. We got to talk about what this Wolf Man looks like. Now, that's the title of the movie, Wolf Man. Damon, I teased earlier that I have indeed seen this design before, and you looked at me. I saw your face just now. And for those on the YouTube, you'll have seen his face too, where he went, "Fuck you talking about? What's this dude talking at his ass again?" I'm just going to back up here a little bit to my childhood. When I was a little kid, I used to pretend I was a werewolf. I'm just one of the werewolf people. Like, I'm obsessed with werewolves. And so even when I was a little kid, I'd run around and there was some other kid at school and he pretended to be a vampire and I pretended to be a werewolf. That's the kind of kid I was. So I've always wanted to be a werewolf, Damon. You know what the ultimate transition for Blake is in this movie? It's my goddamn face. He turns into me, and tell me if I'm not exact. I'm going to turn my head. Tell me if that isn't what the fucking Wolfman looked like in this movie. Be honest with me.
Yeah.
A little bit. Damon, a little bit. And it ain't flattering, folks, okay? I'm taking myself down a peg here I'm sitting there in the theater going, okay, he's starting to look an awful lot like me. Now, if you remember, so the more savvy and more kind of like, social media embedded amongst us who listen will remember that right around Halloween, Universal had their horror nights. Very famously, they have that every year. It's a big event. People go to it. And they had there the Wolfman, display where people could go and get scared by the Wolfman. And people were like, I'm sorry, that's just like an old codger. Like, that ain't a wolf man. That's just some old man with teeth. This disease does not turn you into a wolf. It just kind of like swells your face in certain parts and like, makes your teeth sharp and makes your skin look weird. Yeah, I was looking on the screen going, this looks a lot like me. That's kind of depressing. And I just thought to myself, be careful what you wish for, boy. One day you are going to sit there and see your face on a 100-foot screen looking like absolute dog shit, by the way, because it's not very traditional at all. And you just go, I don't like the look of this. And even worse, it looks like me.
So you're not wrong. But here's what I did like about it, though, because again, the uniqueness of the transformation, this slow transformation where it's like he gets sick, he gets like a fever, and then his hair starts falling out and his teeth start falling out. And then at one point you see his hands kind of descend into these like claw-like shape, his fingernails start popping out. He does transform into a wolf-like creature. Now, one thing I want to give credit to Leigh Whannell for, he said that everything in this movie was practical. No CGI. He wanted to do practical effects. He wanted to pay homage to the great creature creators like Rick Baker, who did American Werewolf in London. But he also said, I don't want to just rip it off and make like a big transformation scene. Everyone does that in every werewolf movie ever made. You get that great transformation scene. It's been done a million times. And I'm not saying you can't do it well. He's just admitting that it's been done. And I appreciate that. So he made a very slow, gradual transformation, like one thing after another. And then at one point, probably one of the more gruesome scenes in this movie that I really did like is when he really starts to fully transform. Blake grabs his own jaw and kind of rips it down, where it kind of becomes like a descended jaw to where he kind of takes on that animal-like form. And again, it is a wolf man. It is not a straight werewolf. He does not transform into the 9-foot tall werewolves in Dog Soldiers. He doesn't even turn into like the weird fully wolf shape of a guy in Silver Bullet. And he certainly doesn't turn into a full wolf like they do in like True Blood. This is like a wolf man. He still looks man-like, which if you look at the Lon Chaney version, that's very much still looks like a man with like wolf on him.
That's hair on his face.
Yeah, but I appreciate that A, they took the slow gradual transformation, and B, they're treating it like a virus, like a disease, so he becomes like a wolf creature. He's not a full-on wolf, and he's not a full-on man. He is a wolf man. So I appreciated that element of it.
Damon, I just did not appreciate how much it looked like me. I'm like, let me get this straight. This disease makes you look like a mangy, rabid human, and that happens to look like me? Man, fuck that. And all of our podcast listeners are going to run over to our YouTube and go, well, now I got to see what Patrick actually looks like. So I get a preview of the Wolfman himself, because I was like, God damn, that really looks like my face.
But here, so, you know, the difficult part is that we've had, I'm not going to rehash past conversation. We talk about Wolfman or werewolves in general, is there's no right or wrong way to transform, nor is there a right or wrong way a werewolf should look. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, everyone's got their own unique take on it. And what I appreciate about this movie is they at least did something different. Like, they didn't just do the same thing you've seen 1,000 times with the moon in the sky and he just suddenly transforms into the beast. It's a slow, gradual. And again, that probably is my favorite aspect of the movie. Kind of got ruined early on with the giant screen literally telling you what happened. But the treating this as a disease that is just like, it's just an infection. It's a thing that transforms. And again, it's almost like rabies or something. You know what I mean? Like,
yes, very much so.
Like
it's mountain fever plus mange.
Yeah, so I appreciate the uniqueness of that. Now, did the werewolf creature look ferocious and scary and, you know, as much as, like, say, the Dog Soldiers? No, not even remotely close to that. And that's fine. I get it. Also, and I'm not knocking it, by the way. I'm just being honest, if you want me to be totally honest about this. I don't know how tall Christopher Abbott is in real life. I'd have to look that up, but he doesn't look like a very big guy.
Oh, I don't think he is.
When he transforms, he's chasing his wife and daughter. Now, I know Julia Garner's not huge. She's a small woman. But yeah. Blake, Christopher Abbott, is about the same size as his wife, maybe like an inch or two taller. Now, again, I'm not saying you can't be a ferocious, terrifying 5'7" wolf. You can be. I'm sure you can be. But much
by the
like
way, they have him as 6 foot tall.
There is no way. There is no way that guy is 6 foot tall.
I don't know. He does not appear to be 6 foot tall in this movie, unless she's taller than I thought.
Yeah, but he just didn't seem very physically imposing, right? Like, it's almost like, oh, it's Wolf Kid. It's Wolf Kid.
But neither of them did, because it's very much like what it makes you into. Even Wolf Dad sort of just looked like it almost shrunk him, because in the cold open sequence, that dad, he's kind of a big strapping dude who's ex-military of some sort, like just kind of a big guy, like a big mountain man. Yeah. And then when you see him in the woods, there's a little scene where like the truck swipes, the headlights swipe, and you see him like he's kind of hunched over and smaller. Like, it kind of just makes you into like a little like dog man, you know. Like, it doesn't make you imposing. It kind of makes you weird looking.
Yeah, again, I'm not saying you can't be a physically imposing person smaller, but it just like, it was almost like, it was like, in terms of dogs, like if you're going to chase me with a Mastiff, I'm going to run for my fucking life. Or like a Rottweiler, I'm going to run for my life. Now, I'm not saying you can't be a ferocious Chihuahua. As a matter of fact, I've run into some ferocious Chihuahuas before. Some of them are the meanest little bastards you've ever met. But ultimately, it's still a Chihuahua. Like, there's no world, and there's nothing in this world that ever made me be cruel to a dog, ever. But, like, if a Chihuahua's latched onto my ankle, I'd be like, get off my ankle. if a Rottweiler came charging at me, I'm running the other direction and closing the door and praying that he doesn't get through the door. That's kind of my point. Like, in a little bit of a way, the Wolfman creature in this movie is a little Chihuahua, not enough Rottweiler. Like, it just doesn't seem physically imposing enough. Like, I'm not saying he can't be ferocious and he can't be scary, but am I wrong in thinking like that was part of the problem? He wasn't scary enough.
Well, it was still just a guy. It was just a guy with less head on his hair and more on his body. Like that's all he really was. So like even then it didn't have any sort of physical impact like and it was like you're saying very practical. So it's just a guy pretending to run at them and it's there were a couple of scenes where it really was just like this is hard to sell right now. This is very difficult to sell as scary and imposing.
Yeah, like you put me in Dog Soldiers, I'm gonna be terrified for my life. Those things were ginormous and scary and huge and just very foreboding. And there's other, werewolf movies like that as well. But this movie, it's almost like, yeah, give me a baseball bat. I'll be good. I'll take out the Wolfman. Like this didn't really scare me. And like, and again, I understand like he's running after a woman and a child. So, but even that's like tropey. It's like, really? Like she couldn't just, she seems like a pretty she seems like the savvy one. She's kind of like, like she almost becomes the survivalist in a way because she's almost like I don't give a fuck, I'll take on whatever. Like she seems kind of like the the strong type of this movie, and again like we said they kind of paint her as almost detached and cold, and you're like, yeah, she'd be the one who would grab a baseball bat and smack her husband with it because she don't give a fuck. That's kind of what they paint Charlotte as in this movie, Julia Garner's character, and it's just, again, little things like that is what kind of took me out of the movie because it's like, he's not really scary. Yeah, he transforms, and again, I appreciate the uniqueness of that, and I appreciate the scientific virus medical nature of it all. But yeah, he just like, he wasn't, him nor Wolf Dad were all that scary. Like I wouldn't, they charge at you. Okay, cool. Like,
it's just some guy. It's just a guy.
He's just a guy.
Yeah, it's not that,
like
it's not that crazy.
Wolfman's got nards. I would totally kick that dude in the balls. Like, I'm not really overly scared about that guy. So anyways, Patrick, let's get to some categories. Let's kick things off as we do each and every week with our first category, talking about some of these particular performances, and that is Primetime Bitch. Our welcome to Primetime Bitch best performance. So Patrick, when it comes to Wolfman, who gets your best performance?
A bitch who is no stranger to prime time himself, Christopher Abbott as Blake, is my best performance. I really think he did a good job expressing being kind of a girl dad and somebody who really cared about his daughter and his wife. And, he does a good job of showing that this transition is very painful and he's suffering. What I mean is like imagine just being up in the mountains somewhere and you get, a real bad sickness that is just putting you down. That's very much what he's going through and very much what he's able to show off in, I would say, the first 2/3 of the movie. And then, that last 15 minutes not his acting couldn't save that. Unfortunately, it just wasn't intimidating. It wasn't, and I knew what was coming for, the last hour or so. And so that's not his fault, but I think he did a good job overall.
Yeah, like I said, in a way, Christopher Abbott, because of the script and the way it was written, he almost did too good of a job because you like him too much. Like, you're kind of like, I like this guy. Yeah. Like, he's a good dad. He's a good guy. And you're, again, and they wasted so much time. Well, they spent so much time building him up as a good guy. They refused to make him a bad guy. And again, that's my biggest problem.
And they spent a lot of that time not making Charlotte super, super exciting, or not exciting, but just they didn't make her the one that you really start. You should have been sitting with Charlotte from day one. You actually should have been in her perspective mostly, and then switching to his perspective every now and then to show what the disease was doing. That's really how this movie should have gone. It should have been basically Julia Garner's movie. Like, she should have been leading it, but it was Christopher Abbott's movie.
And to that point, it's almost like when we meet Christopher Abbott's character Blake in the early going, we see his dad is like like he literally to wake his son up. He says a tin hut, like he's in the military, and his son has to jump out of bed, make his bed in the morning, and it's like a military thing. And his dad is very foreboding, and you can tell like it's not like a typical father son. It's almost like a fearful of his dad because his dad is so imposing and like he's overprotective to a fault. And they briefly try to paint Blake as that early on. There's a moment where his daughter jumps up
Yeah.
on like a guardrail thing in the city, and he tells her to get down, and she doesn't listen. He kind of yells at her, and you're kind of like, ooh, that's literally it though. They never bring him back to that character again, where it's like he's walking this fine line where he's like a good dad, but he can also be a little scary, like a little foreboding. They never paint him that way, and so in a way, like it's almost like it works against the cause of this character becoming the Wolfman. As I said, it's almost like again, it's like they don't want him to be addicted to the heroin. They don't want him. They're like, no, he's too good of a guy. He would never put that needle back in his arm. Well, that's the nature of addicts. It's gonna happen. And if you're telling a story about an addict, it kind of takes away the point if you never bring the heroin in. That's kind of what they're like. He's kind of like they give him 1 second of being kind of a scary dad, and then they never bring it up again. And it's
Never
like
again.
he's the perfect dad. To that point, my best performance, I'm going to go in the other direction. I am going to give credit to Julia Garner, who is one of my all-time favorite actors working in Hollywood today. She is tremendous. Ozark, everything she's done, I've liked. But the reason, and weirdly, the reason I like her in this movie, this goes back to the writing. She plays the kind of like disconnected, disconcerted mom very, very well. Now, again, the problem with Charlotte as a character comes down to the script, not the way Julia Garner plays her. Actually, Julia Garner plays it perfectly because they wanted her to seem like this disaffected, disassociated mother. Well, she nails it. Perfectly, she nails it. And so even though it's a problem in this movie because you don't particularly like Charlotte, and that sets off a whole other chain of events we've already been talking about, she does it well. She plays it great.
She really does. Yeah, like you wanted someone that you're not necessarily going to root for. Hey, Julia Garner's got your back. Her performance worked it, and she tried. She's trying her best in that last 15 minutes, but the script itself it got in the way. Like the ideas got in the way, the choices made to weigh the characters the way they weighed them. That stuff got in the way. But otherwise, she's always a dynamite performer.
Yeah, she's great. Next category, Patrick, let's talk about our MVP, our Ken Foray Banana Hammock MVP Award, given out after great character actor Ken Foray in the movie From Beyond, where he jumps down a flight of stairs and into a basement to kill a creature wearing nothing more than a thong bikini. If that's not an MVP performance, I don't know what is. So, Patrick, when it comes to Wolfman, who gets your most valuable player, your MVP award?
Damon, this week I'm going to give a technical award out for MVP, and that's to our sound designer PK Hooker. Any great horror film, I think, really relies on good sound design. It really does, and this movie needed it desperately, and they got it. They really did. There were all these great quieter moments where it was a detail that was creeping up on you, that was crawling up to you through the sound. The sound was carrying that stuff around. Like in the beginning when they're being chased down by what you cannot see. You cannot see what the wolf man is that's chasing down young Blake and his dad, but you can hear it breathe. You can hear it sniff or snort. And you can hear it rustling in the leaves or moving here and there. And when Blake starts to transform, there's a lot of like squelching because skin is getting infected or nails are falling off, or when his hearing changes and he's hearing a spider, 10 rooms over, then he can hear it thumping around and stuff. The design of the sound created that blanket of dread all over the movie that might not have been there had PK Hooker not really made sure and heightened those levels. I just watched a movie that I'm helping out to get a movie off the ground, and I watched a non-sound design version of it, and it's amazing to see what happens without that great sound design in there. So much of the dread, so much of the scares, so much of like the texture of the movie actually comes from the sound design, and it's no different here in Wolfman.
No, I agree, and you'd be surprised those little technical aspects what makes such a huge difference in movies like this. And it's funny you picked a technical person, so did I. My MVP goes to none other than Arjun Twitin. I'm not sure if I'm butchering his name or not, but he is the man behind the practical effects in Wolfman. Now, as we said, the actual design of the Wolfman isn't the scariest thing in the world because it literally just looks like a man kind of looking like a wolf. But as I said, I appreciated the uniqueness of this transformation process, slowly devolving into this creature like form. And even again, even though it doesn't look all that foreboding, I appreciate that they tried to do something a little different, and credit to Lee Wanell for saying, I only want practical effects. I want to pay homage to great practical effects masters of the past like Rick Baker and Arjun Tooten, who is from the Netherlands. He's also worked on, he's worked on a lot of great films. He worked on both of the recent Ghostbusters films. He also worked on a movie that I like called Those Who Wish Me Dead. It's written by Taylor Sheridan, of course, who does Yellowstone and a bunch of other stuff. But he also worked on Pan's Labyrinth, which
Yeah.
Guillermo del Toro, iconic. Practical effects. And you and I have said this for years. You and I are practical effects geeks. We always prefer practical effects where, again, I'm not saying CGI doesn't have its place. It does in the right moments. You don't get Thanos and Infinity War and Endgame without CGI. There are moments for it. But I love practical effects, especially in horror films. And I thought, for all the flaws of the look, the design that just didn't totally work for me, I thought the creature effects were cool and unique and different and something I really hadn't seen before, and that a lot of that goes down to Arjun Twitin as the man in charge of the special effects.
And it is important to note that, and I know it's become very popular, and I'm glad it's become very popular to use more and more practical effects. But even when you use practical effects, and they just don't like to say this anymore because it's people want to hear practical effects. CG is always there to help clean things up. They're always there. They use it in Marvel movies just for like literally like the neck of the superhero suit doesn't bend the right way, and they use CG to clean it up. Like they're trust me, they're doing that in Wolfman as well, but they're trying to be as real and in camera at every moment as possible with the assistance of their great CGI team. They're always there to help. And you see it in all those great little details when they'll cut to a piece of skin or a nail or hair or his face. His face really starts to swell and malform and all that stuff and start to look like me, basically. Like when that stuff starts happening, you really appreciate that it's texturally there on screen for you, and it draws you in closer. It makes you feel more attached to the movie.
Yeah, I appreciate the Lee Wanell's like, I want practical effects in this movie, and I think again, I've seen the CG version of werewolf movies, and they never seem to work. Never really seems to work for me. So again, Rick Baker set the standard back in American Werewolf in London, and everyone's kind of been duplicating it since then. And while some are better and some are worse, I appreciate when someone attacks a werewolf movie with practical effects, and that's what Lee Wanell did, and that's what Arjun Twitin did with his practical effects. So kudos to him. Patrick, let's move on to our next category, which is Best Scare. This is a horror film, sort of. So let's talk about Wolfman and the Best Scare.
My best scare I called doggy door. So when they are kind of holed up in the house and they know this beast wolf dad is out there stalking them, they're always trying to, board up a window, board up a door, block a door, do this, do that. And there was just a great misdirect in one point where you're like, I thought everything was fine. I thought they were in one part of the house where they were kind of safe. And they just missed, of all things, and I know this was on purpose, they missed the doggy door. And the doggy, wolf dog dad, reaches through and grabs, I believe it's Blake. He grabs Blake or something like that. It was just one of those great jump scares where you're just like, you know what? I didn't see that coming. You got me there. Kudos to you.
You know why I have a problem with that scene?
Tell me.
When we meet Blake and the dad early on, do we ever see a dog?
I don't remember a dog.
So
that's not to say his dad didn't get a dog once Blake moved away.
I know, but I'm saying,
on.
like, the convenience of the dog door, like, if you watch the movie Fear, the Mark Wahlberg film, you know what I'm talking about, from the late 90s, There's a great, really disturbing scene with the dog door where they stuff a dog's head through there and drop it through the dog door. It's a really effective, like, oh shit moment in the movie because they very astutely mention the dog and have the dog in several scenes before that. The doggy door in this movie almost felt like we got to have a good jump scare and that's the way to do it. But there was never a dog in this movie. Like, I don't remember them ever mentioning a dog. So I'm like, it's a cool effect. I mean, I agree. It was a good jump scare, but I'm like, they just did that for the jump scare. I don't remember them ever mentioning having a dog at any point. That's just me being the story person. Like, if you're going to show it to us, at least give us a reason to be there. And I never heard them once mention a dog. Maybe it's in like a deleted scene, like they had a dog and they just like, oh, we had to cut him out. I had to cut him out for timing purposes. But I was like, why is there a dog door here? They never had a dog. So my best scare isn't more on like the jump scare version. It's more of like when they finally commit to Blake becoming the creature, the beast to come after his family, which again takes forever to get there. Charlotte and Ginger run into a barn and they lock the door and there's no lights in there. It's totally dark. And Blake literally digs under the door like a dog would to get in. And he's stalking his family and he has that dog vision, which I agree. It's a cool, like, I agree it was kind of cool, but it was also kind of weird because it just, like, the way they did it, the way they shot it just looked odd.
Why did their mouths change? I still don't understand why their mouths look different.
Yeah, it was weird. But that was very harrowing of like him getting closer and closer to his family and them like, knowing he's right there, but it's in the dark. They can't quite see him. He sees them perfectly because his vision's like night vision, which again kind of takes you out of the scare of the scene. But from his family's perspective, they know he's in there, but they can't, I mean, it's pitch black dark in this room. They can't see anything. So I did enjoy that kind of like the dread of that moment, like what's going to happen. And that actually takes us to our next category, which is best gore, and that's going to lead right into my best gore, which is the great effect that happens in that moment is Blake comes in and Charlotte astutely notices that there's a bear trap in there, and she sets the bear trap right in front of her and Ginger, and when Blake is coming after them, he sees them perfectly in this weird night vision, but he doesn't see the bear trap, and he takes a step in, and you hear the bear trap clap down on him, and he screams out in horror, and Ginger and Charlotte are able to run away while Blake is trapped in the bear trap. Now, the best gore of that scene is, like we've seen actually happens in Wild, when poor animals are trapped in traps like that, they will literally gnaw their own leg off to break free of the trap. And when he tries to break free of the trap, he tries to rip it out, doesn't happen, and Blake's just like, fuck it, I'm going to bite my own leg off and gnaw it free. And that's a pretty gnarly scene when he just literally just like, all right, here we go. And he just jumps down there and starts gnawing away at his own leg. So the conclusion of my best scare is kind of like a cool setup where she uses the bear trap to get him, which kind of brings that moment to a climax. But then he just gnaws off his own leg to go back after his daughter and wife. So I thought that was a pretty cool gore.
Yeah, that was a pretty cool gore. And my gore comes a little bit earlier in the movie while he's still in the throes of the sort of feverish transition. Charlotte goes to check on his arm, and it's looking not very good, Damon. Rather infected, rather bloody. The gash has gotten very big and very oozy and nasty. And he sort of recoils, like, get away from me. And he grabs his arm and begins to furiously scratch at the wound, and that is rough to look at. I mean, it's rough to watch him just dig into that wound and grab at it, and then he actually turns like a dog who has some like a hot spot on his leg or something, and starts gnawing at it. He's very gnawy in this movie, and he gnaws at that wound, and I thought that was just rather disgusting. And I was like, hey, fair play. That kind of grossed me out.
It kind of looked a little bit like the infamous scene in Cabin Fever where the girl is shaving her legs, and it's just like, oh no, like she's shaving off her own skin. When he's scratching at his arm, and it's just like pussy and bloody and cut up, and it's just pretty gross. So yeah, I think that was really good. And again, practical effects, well done. Yeah. Patrick, next category, remake, sequel, or leave it alone. This is pretty self-explanatory. This is where we take whatever movie we're reviewing and we basically come with the premise of should they remake it, should they sequelize it, or should they just leave it alone? So when it comes to Wolfman, Patrick, remake, sequel, or leave it alone?
Damon, right off the heels of my best score, I decided that I think we're going to go with remake this time around. Now, obviously, that's going to happen anyway. Every few decades, they're going to remake the Wolfman anyway. But because of My Best Gore, that was actually my favorite part of the movie. When you see what's happening to his arm and he just starts to furiously scratch at it, I thought to myself, "Oh, please tell me that this is about to turn into a very disgusting body horror movie." Like I thought that was the new end for the rest of the movie. It didn't. It didn't end up being that for the most part, even though they give it a couple of moments. But now I'm realizing that a body horror version of a Wolfman movie would be amazing. It would be something I would absolutely love. And the idea that your body is going through mange is a very disgusting disease. To watch a guy like tear at infected, putrid flesh, Damon, I don't know what's wrong with me, but that sounds very appealing.
We talk about this movie didn't go far enough in the
Yeah.
story.
Mm-hmm.
I think the body horror would have saved it, even with the story
Yes.
being wrong. If you would have gone full substance and just been like, fuck it, we're going to go just off the rails with a body horror, even though the story would have been messed up, I think we would have been like, yeah, that was pretty cool. Like, that's still, because again,
Mm-hmm.
there can be, even when stories sometimes aren't great, you can still have a saving grace of like a really
Yeah.
cool effect or really cool, harrowing chase scene, whatever it is. I think that could have saved this. And to your point, I'm going to also say remake, and I'm going to go back to the story side. Now, I'm not going to say remake in the sense of do what we talked about and just fix what was wrong in
Right.
terms of
Right.
make the dad, actually transform and become the villain earlier in the movie. I'm not going to go through that. But here's where I say remake, because if you cut out the opening where you literally tell us the story at the beginning of the movie, which is just, again, I think that was a studio thing. I really do. I'm not, because Lee Whannell's a pretty savvy filmmaker. I have a hard time
Yeah.
believing he was just like, let me just give away the movie at the very beginning in a little synopsis. I feel like very much that was the studio being like, they'll not get it if you don't tell them. But when I say remake, I say, what I loved about this movie was the uniqueness and the creativity behind the wolf creature. It's a virus. Take that and run with it and make it what it should have been, which is a horrific transformation, kind of combining your idea of body horror and actually transforming this thing into a terrifying creature and make it come after somebody. Doesn't, again, you can take out the family aspect, you can totally switch that to something else. Fuck it, you could make it a camper and make it so generic where it's just a group of campers get attacked by a werewolf. Whatever it is, just go for it. And that concept of the wolf being a virus infected creature is such a cool, unique. That's what I love most about this movie. I'd never seen that before. I'd never seen them treat a werewolf like it's a virus. And I was like, that's cool. Again, transformation didn't totally work and the end creature wasn't all that scary. But if you take it that next step further, maybe combine some of your body horror elements and actually, make it that transformation and make it that, creature being infected, go for it. And I think you could make a really, really cool version of a Wolfman story because I love that concept. I say it all the time. Great concept, poor execution. That was kind of the problem with this movie. Great concept, the execution lacked.
Yeah. Yeah. I think they were trying to do a lot of things and they couldn't do any one of them strongly.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, that's where you're gonna suffer. Patrick, our last category, instead of is it scary, it is a Wolfman movie. So Patrick, is it Wolfie?
You know what, Damon? Unfortunately, I'm going to say no. I'm going to say it's not that wolfy. They went for the more, this more like reality based thing, which is, again, that's actually fine. But that makes it far less wolfy. We talked about this earlier. What does a werewolf movie need? It needs one of two things: a deep theme of the beast within or the magic. And they sort of teetered on not giving us either one of those things. They sort of just decided, like, we're kind of not going to do those things at all. There's no beast within trying to unleash in Blake, and there's no magic. It's a disease, and it's treating him like a disease, and it's turning him into essentially a rabid man, and that's all that's really happening. So no magic, no theme, no traditional werewolf theme. Some stuff I hadn't seen before, and I'm going to credit it for that. There's certainly blood and guts and some jump scares and a lot of tension here and there, some inventive set pieces. Again, Lee Whannell's not a bad director. This isn't a bad movie. It's probably a 2-star, 2.5-star type thing. That means it's right down the middle. It's a perfectly average movie for the most part. But I just feel like, whoa, what could have been? Like, maybe what if we gave Lee Whannell, like, I don't know, a mini series to make this happen? Maybe it would have been something different. Maybe it would have been something awesome, because he's an awesome director. He really is. He's not just any average director. So I don't want it to make it seem like I'm coming down on him, because he did indeed deliver a lot of original stuff. But in the process, it lost the essence of what makes a great werewolf movie.
This is a frustratingly okay movie.
Yes.
That's the best way I can describe it. It's not bad. It really is not bad, but it's also not great. And it's the parts that are good, you're like, man, they really came up with something cool and unique and different. I've never seen that before. But then the parts that they don't get right, you're just like, why wouldn't you just go for it? Like, why wouldn't you just, just mash down the gas pedal and just get to 90, man? Just go for it. Crash into the brick wall. Go for it. To relate this to another movie, a character that had maybe 5 minutes of screen time, but you got what they were going for. I know this is a big switch, but in Monster Squad, when we meet the Wolfman, he is a terrifying creature. When he transforms back into a man, you realize this is a curse. He does not want to be a Wolfman. And when he calls the dad and says, he's going to kill your son, and then he transforms, and you see that great transformation with the spit flying, and he transforms back into werewolf. And then when they kill him at the end, spoiler for a movie that's 40 years old, when they kill him at the end, he literally says, thank you. He does not want to be this thing. He does not want to be this creature. We spent 5 minutes with the Wolfman in the entire movie, and that character arc makes total sense. Total sense. You feel bad for him. He's a creature, you don't feel bad for him. He transforms back, and you're like, yeah, you kind of feel bad for this guy, because he never wanted this disease. He never wanted this curse. They never went there with this movie. They refused to go there. They're like, we can't make Blake the bad guy, so he can't be the full wolf. And then again, when the transformation does happen, the wolf isn't all that scary. So it's a frustratingly okay movie. It's got good parts. It's got good bones. But we've talked about this 1,000 times in the show when we get into a movie that we're like, it almost got there. It almost makes it worse, because you're like, you were so close. You were so close to making this like a really good movie, but then you didn't. And that kind of made, we've reviewed really bad movies on this podcast before, and we're like, there's really not a whole lot of saving grace here. It's just not well done. It's not a good movie. But when you're that close and you just don't quite get there, it's frustrating. So that's why I say it's a frustratingly okay movie.
Damon, I think what you want to say is it's a bit of a blue balls movie, isn't it?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah,
it kind of is.
Yeah, it doesn't want to quite get you there, and yeah. So again, Wolfman in theaters right now. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. As I said, it's not bad. It's just not great. So, like you said, 2.5 stars. That's a lot better than a lot of movies get. I'll tell you that right now. But, if you're going hoping for a 5-star or 4-star movie, sadly, I don't think you're going to get with this one. That is our episode for this week. As we mentioned earlier, this is actually a very busy January going into February. We got like back-to-back weeks of new movies. So next week, we're going to be reviewing the new Haunted House film from Steven Soderbergh. I'm not going to get into it right now. I'm curious about our shared relation with Steven Soderbergh as a director, because I have things I both liked and disliked about Steven Soderbergh. So maybe we'll talk about that next week. So we'll get into that. The movie's called Presence, so that'll be our next episode. As always, want to say a big thank you to everyone that tunes in the show. Make sure you check us out on all your favorite podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, over on our YouTube channel. Please, 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 I hate begging, but I'll beg. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Even if you don't watch us over there, it just makes a huge difference with the algorithm, search results, things like that. Just search Rewind of the Living Dead, like and subscribe our page, and you never have to go back to it again if you don't want to watch the episodes over there. That's totally fine, but we are trying to build that audience over there, so please check us out. And also check out our website, rewindofthelivingdead.com. Not only do we post a podcast over there, but we also post news, trailers, stories, all kinds of stuff over there.
T-shirt.
So and our t-shirt. So if you are just a horror fanatic in general and you just want all your horror news and all your horror information, go to rewindofthelivingdead.com and find it over there. Questions, comments, movies you'd like us to review. Did you see Wolfman? Let us know what you thought. Send us emails, rotlivingdead@gmail.com. That's rotlivingdead@gmail.com. And you can also find us on every major social media platform, Twitter/X, Facebook, and Instagram. Once again, just search Rewind of the Living Dead. You will find us over there. And we always try to respond to every message. We can't get to everything, but we always try desperately to get back to everybody. So send us messages. We'd love to hear from you guys. And you can also find us on our own personal social media channels. I am at Damon Martin, and you are?
At Director Patrick.
And a big thank you, as always, for everyone that tunes in the show. We will be back next week with another edition of Rewind of the Living Dead as we review Presence. Thanks for tuning in. We will see you then.
Oh.